October 20th, 1944, 10:15 hours, Red Beach, Leyte Gulf, Philippines. The rhythmic crack of semi-automatic fire echoed across the invasion beach, a sound the Japanese Imperial Army had never heard before at this volume, this intensity, this relentless pace. 8 rounds, reload, 8 more rounds. The Americans were firing their rifles as fast as Japanese soldiers could work bolt-action mechanisms, but without the pause, without the vulnerability, without the fatal hesitation that had defined infantry combat for half a century. The weapon producing this revolutionary firepower was the M1 Garand rifle, and it was about to demonstrate why General George S. Patton would call it the greatest battle implement ever devised. The Japanese, armed with their bolt-action Arisaka Type 38 and Type 99 rifles, were about to discover that bringing 19th century technology to a 20th century firefight was a fatal miscalculation. The transformation of American infantry firepower had begun not on the battlefields of the Pacific, but in the quiet testing grounds of Springfield Armory, Massachusetts, more than a decade before the first shots were fired at Pearl Harbor. The weapon that would fundamentally alter the mathematics of infantry combat was born from a single revolutionary insight. In modern warfare, the soldier who could fire more accurate shots in less time would dominate the battlefield. John Cantius Garand, a Canadian-born firearms designer working for the United States Army, had spent years pursuing what military theorists considered impossible: a self-loading rifle reliable enough for military service, accurate enough for combat effectiveness, and simple enough for mass production and field maintenance. Previous attempts at semi-automatic military rifles had failed spectacularly. The French Mariner, the Mexican Mondragon, the American Peterson all had proven too complex, too fragile, or too unreliable for the brutal conditions of actual combat. But Garand's design, finalized in 1932 and officially adopted by the United States Army on January 9, 1936, solved problems that had defeated every previous designer. The M1 Garand operated on a gas-operated, rotating bolt system that was simultaneously elegant and robust. When a round was fired, a portion of the propellant gases was diverted through a port in the barrel, driving a piston that cycled the action, ejected the spent cartridge, loaded a fresh round from the internal magazine, and cocked the hammer, all in a fraction of a second. The specifications documented in Ordnance Department records revealed the weapon's revolutionary capabilities. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds unloaded, measured 43.6 inches in overall length, and fired the .30-06 Springfield cartridge, one of the most powerful rifle rounds in military service. The effective range extended to 500 yards, with exceptional accuracy at distances that would have challenged any bolt-action rifle. But the true revolution lay in the rate of fire: 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute compared to 10 to 15 rounds per minute for a skilled operator of a bolt-action rifle. The M1's internal magazine held 8 rounds, loaded via an en-bloc clip that ejected automatically when the last round was fired, producing the distinctive ping sound that would become iconic. Critics initially argued this sound would alert enemies that the rifle was empty, but combat experience would prove that in the chaos of battle, with multiple M1s firing simultaneously, identifying individual reload sounds was impossible. By 1941, when the United States entered World War II, Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms had produced approximately 600,000 M1 Garand rifles. By war end, production would exceed 5.4 million units, representing one of the most successful military procurement programs in American history. Every dollar invested, every hour of factory production time, every technical refinement contributed to creating what would become the standard by which all military rifles would be measured. The Japanese Imperial Army, meanwhile, had entered the Pacific War with rifles that represented evolutionary refinements of designs from the 1890s. The Arisaka Type 38, adopted in 1905, and the Type 99, introduced in 1939, were both bolt-action rifles requiring manual operation between each shot. A soldier firing an Arisaka had to unlock the bolt, pull it rearward to eject the spent cartridge, push it forward to chamber a fresh round, rotate it to lock, then aim and fire. a sequence requiring precious seconds that could mean the difference between life and death. The Japanese military doctrine had been built around these weapons for decades. Training emphasized accuracy, fire discipline, and the spiritual connection between warrior and weapon. The Arisaka rifles were robust, reliable, and accurate, excellent weapons by the standards of the previous war. But the Pacific War would not be fought by the standards of 1918. It would be fought with the weapons of 1944. And the Japanese were about to discover that they had brought inadequate tools to a gunfight that would decide the fate of empires. The strategic situation in October 1944 reflected this technological disparity. General MacArthur, commanding Southwest Pacific Area forces, had promised to return to the Philippines. His invasion force for Operation King II, the liberation of Leyte, comprised over 200,000 combat troops of the United States 6th Army under General Walter Kruger. Opposing them were approximately 260,000 troops of the Japanese 14th Area Army under General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the conqueror of Malaya and Singapore, a commander whose tactical brilliance was about to be negated by inferior weaponry. The Japanese defensive strategy for the Philippines had been meticulously planned. They had studied American tactics in the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and the Marianas. They had prepared defensive positions, established supply lines, and positioned their forces to contest every beach, every town, every ridge. They had calculated ammunition requirements, planned counterattack routes, and prepared for the bitter attritional warfare that had characterized previous Pacific battles. What they had not calculated, what they could not have fully anticipated, was the cumulative effect of every American rifleman being able to fire 5 times faster than their own soldiers while maintaining equal or superior accuracy. The mathematics of small arms combat were about to be rewritten by industrial capacity married to technical innovation, and the Japanese were about to pay the price for their technological conservatism in blood and defeat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fundamental limitations of bolt-action rifle combat had been understood by military theorists since the trenches of World War I, but tradition, budget constraints, and technical challenges had prevented most armies from addressing the problem. For nearly half a century, infantry combat had been governed by a simple, brutal equation. The side that could deliver more accurate fire faster would control the battlefield. Bolt-action rifles, for all their reliability and accuracy, imposed a ceiling on this firepower that could not be overcome by training or tactics alone. The Japanese Imperial Army's experience with the Arisaka rifle platform stretched back to the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. The Type 38 rifle, chambered in 6.5 by 50 mm Arisaka, had served with distinction in that conflict and through the subsequent decades of expansion in China and Southeast Asia. Japanese military philosophy emphasized the rifle as the soul of the infantry, the weapon through which discipline, training, and warrior spirit were expressed. Marksmanship training in the Imperial Army was rigorous and extensive, with soldiers expected to achieve high levels of accuracy under various conditions. The bolt-action mechanism, refined over decades, represented the pinnacle of late 19th century firearms technology. The Arisaka's action was smooth, reliable, and capable of functioning under extreme conditions: tropical heat, Arctic cold, mud, sand, and saltwater exposure. The rifle's simplicity meant it could be maintained with minimal tools and could continue functioning even when individual components showed wear. Japanese armories had perfected production techniques that could turn out thousands of rifles monthly using relatively simple machinery. But simplicity and reliability could not overcome the fundamental constraint of manual operation. A trained Japanese soldier, under ideal conditions, could fire his Arisaka approximately 15 times per minute while maintaining combat accuracy. This required the soldier to acquire target, aim, fire, unlock the bolt by rotating it upward, pull the bolt rearward to eject the spent cartridge, push the bolt forward to chamber a fresh round from the internal magazine, rotate the bolt downward to lock it, reacquire the target which might have moved during the 3 to 4 second cycle, and fire again. Each shot required taking the rifle off target. Each bolt manipulation required the shooter to break his sight picture. Each ejection and chambering cycle created a moment of vulnerability when the soldier could not fire. These moments accumulated across firefights, across battles, across campaigns. In a squad-level engagement, 10 Japanese soldiers with Arisaka rifles could deliver approximately 150 aim shots per minute under optimal conditions. In reality, with combat stress, movement, concealment requirements, and suppressive fire affecting their firing rate, the actual sustained rate was considerably lower. Japanese tactical doctrine had evolved around these constraints. Infantry tactics emphasized fire discipline, with NCOs controlling when subordinates could fire to prevent ammunition waste and maintain tactical coordination. Banzai charges, often misunderstood as fanatical death wishes, were actually tactical responses to the firepower limitations of Japanese infantry weapons. When facing American automatic weapons, prolonged firefights favored the Americans. The charge was an attempt to close distance rapidly and engage in close combat where Japanese training in bayonet fighting might prove advantageous. The Japanese had attempted to compensate for individual firepower limitations through crew-served weapons. The Type 92 heavy machine gun and Type 96 light machine gun provided automatic fire support. But these weapons were heavy, required multiple soldiers to operate effectively, and were priority targets for American forces. Losing a machine gun meant losing the majority of a unit's automatic firepower, whereas American infantry could maintain high rates of fire even after losing support weapons, because every rifleman carried semi-automatic capability. Japanese tactical doctrine in the Pacific had been forced to adapt to their firepower disadvantage through the battles of 1942 and 1943. At Guadalcanal, Japanese night attacks had attempted to negate American firepower advantages by reducing visibility and engagement ranges. At Tarawa, Japanese defenders had constructed elaborate fortifications that channeled American attacks into predetermined kill zones where concentrated bolt-action fire could be effective. At Saipan, Japanese forces had employed defense-in-depth tactics, trading space for time while attempting to inflict maximum casualties on attacking forces. All of these tactical adaptations represented attempts to work around the fundamental constraint. Japanese infantrymen could not generate sufficient individual firepower to match American semi-automatic rifles in sustained combat. Even when Japanese soldiers achieved superior tactical positions, even when they executed perfect ambushes, the disparity in rate of fire meant that American forces could recover from initial disadvantage and overwhelm Japanese positions through sheer volume of accurate fire. Intelligence reports from Japanese units that had faced American forces in previous campaigns documented the problem clearly. Captured documents, translated by Allied intelligence services, revealed Japanese officers' concerns about American firepower. One report from a regimental commander on New Guinea stated, "Enemy infantry maintain continuous fire with their rifles. Our soldiers cannot match this fire rate with manual action weapons. When engaging equal numbers of enemy infantry in open combat, our casualties are consistently higher." Another intelligence document, this one from the Marianas Campaign, noted, "American infantry rifles appear to fire automatically. Each soldier generates fire equivalent to 3 of our riflemen. Traditional fire superiority calculations no longer apply to this enemy." Japanese commanders were documenting the problem, but they could not solve it. Their industrial capacity, already stretched by naval and aviation requirements, could not shift to producing millions of semi-automatic rifles, even if suitable designs had been available. The Japanese had experimented with semi-automatic designs. The Type 4 rifle, developed late in the war, was a semi-automatic weapon based on American gas operation principles. But it entered production too late and in too limited numbers to affect the outcome. By the time the first Type 4 rifles reached combat units in 1945, Japan's industrial capacity had been so degraded by American bombing that only a few thousand were ever produced. The vast majority of Japanese soldiers would fight the entire Pacific War with manually operated rifles designed in the previous century. By October 1944, this firepower disparity had been compounding across hundreds of engagements throughout the Pacific. American forces had learned to exploit their advantage, developing tactics that forced Japanese defenders into sustained firefights where rate of fire decided outcomes. Marine and Army infantry training emphasized aggressive fire and maneuver, knowing that American squads could suppress enemy positions more effectively than their opponents could respond. The stage was set for the Philippines campaign to demonstrate this advantage on a massive scale. Every American soldier waiting ashore at Leyte carried a weapon that could fire as fast as he could pull the trigger, 8 rounds before reloading, 40 or more aimed shots per minute. Every Japanese soldier waiting in defensive positions carried a weapon requiring manual operation between shots, 5 rounds in the magazine, 15 aimed shots per minute at best. The mathematics of combat had already determined the outcome before the first shots were fired. The origin story of the M1 Garand began not with military requirements, but with the vision of a single designer who understood that the future of infantry combat lay in self-loading firearms. John C. Cantius Garand, born in Quebec in 1888, had immigrated to the United States as a young man and found work in textile mills before discovering his talent for mechanical design. By 1919, he had joined the United States Army's Springfield Armory as a designer, where he would spend the next 34 years perfecting the weapon that would bear his name. The technical challenges Garand faced were formidable. A semi-automatic rifle required harnessing the energy of fired cartridges to cycle the action automatically, but this had to be accomplished without compromising accuracy, reliability, or durability. Previous designs had failed because they were too heavy, too complex, too sensitive to fouling, or too prone to malfunction under field conditions. Military authorities were skeptical that any semi-automatic design could meet the demanding requirements of combat service. Garand's breakthrough came through his gas-operated rotating bolt design. When a round was fired, a portion of the propellant gases was tapped from a port near the muzzle, driving a long piston rod that cycled the operating mechanism. This system placed the gas operation point far from the chamber, reducing heat buildup and fouling in critical components. The rotating bolt locked into the receiver with multiple lugs, providing secure lockup that could handle the powerful 30-06 cartridge's 50,000 pounds per square inch chamber pressure. The development process consumed over a decade of testing, refinement, and evaluation. Springfield Armory records document hundreds of test firings under extreme conditions. Prototypes were subjected to temperatures ranging from -40 degrees Fahrenheit to +140 degrees. They were immersed in mud, sand, and salt water, then fired without cleaning. They were dropped from heights onto concrete. Each failure led to refinements. Each weakness was identified and eliminated through redesign. By 1932, Garand had produced a design that met every military requirement. The rifle could fire reliably after being submerged in water. It functioned in Arctic cold and tropical heat. It maintained accuracy after firing thousands of rounds without cleaning. Most importantly, it could sustain rates of fire that no bolt-action rifle could match while maintaining combat accuracy at ranges exceeding 500 yards. The Ordnance Department's formal testing in 1933 confirmed what Garand had achieved, a genuine revolution in infantry weapons. The adoption process moved with unusual speed for military bureaucracy. On January 9, 1936, the United States Army officially designated Garand's rifle as the U.S. rifle caliber .30 M1. This made the United States the first nation to adopt a semi-automatic rifle as the standard infantry weapon. Other countries had experimented with semi-automatic designs, but none had committed to full-scale adoption and production. The American decision reflected both confidence in the design and recognition that future warfare would demand higher rates of fire. Production requirements were staggering. Springfield Armory's initial capacity was approximately 100 rifles a day. To arm an entire military force numbering in the millions would require massive industrial expansion. In 1940, Winchester Repeating Arms Company was contracted to produce M1 rifles, bringing additional production capacity online. By 1941, with war looming, both facilities were operating at maximum capacity, producing over 1,000 rifles daily combined. The manufacturing process itself represented American industrial capability at its peak. Each M1 Garand required precision machining of multiple components to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The receiver was forged from high-grade steel, then machined to exact specifications. The barrel was hammer-forged, rifled with 4 grooves, and carefully gauged for dimensional accuracy. The gas system components required precise tolerances to ensure reliable operation. The trigger mechanism involved multiple small parts that had to function smoothly under combat conditions. Quality control procedures documented in Ordnance Department records were exhaustive. Every rifle was proof-fired with high-pressure test cartridges before acceptance. Accuracy testing required rifles to maintain specified group sizes at 100 yards. Function testing involved firing hundreds of rounds under various conditions. Rifles that failed any test were rejected and returned for correction. This rigorous quality assurance ensured that soldiers received weapons that would function reliably in combat. The logistical infrastructure supporting M1 Garand deployment was equally impressive. The rifle fired the .30-06 Springfield cartridge, requiring modifications to ammunition production facilities. The en-bloc clip loading system required manufacturing millions of 8-round clips. Training programs had to be developed to teach proper maintenance and operation. Spare parts pipelines had to be established worldwide. Armorer training programs had to be expanded to ensure field-level maintenance capability. By December 1941, when the United States entered World War II, approximately 600,000 M1 Garand rifles had been produced. This gave American forces an initial advantage, though not all units were equipped with the new weapon. National Guard units and some Army divisions still carried the bolt-action M1903 Springfield rifle, but production was accelerating rapidly. By mid-1943, M1 Garand production exceeded 100,000 rifles monthly. By war's end, total production would reach 5,468,772 rifles, representing one of the most successful weapons procurement programs in military history. The weapon specifications reflected its revolutionary capabilities. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds empty, balanced for rapid target acquisition. The .30-06 cartridge delivered 2,800 feet per second muzzle velocity, providing flat trajectory and excellent accuracy at extended ranges. The gas-operated system cycled at approximately 600 rounds per minute theoretical rate, though practical combat rate of fire was 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute. The effective range extended to 500 yards for point targets and 800 yards for area targets, comparable to or exceeding bolt-action rifles. Combat loading procedures were elegant in their simplicity. A soldier pushed the 8-round en-bloc clip into the internal magazine from the top, and the bolt automatically closed, chambering the first round. After firing 8 rounds, the empty clip ejected automatically with the distinctive metallic ping, and the bolt locked open, ready for immediate reloading. A trained soldier could reload in under 3 seconds. This speed, combined with the semi-automatic operation, meant that American riflemen could maintain sustained, accurate fire at rates previously achievable only with machine guns. The M1 Garand represented more than technological innovation. It represented American industrial philosophy applied to warfare. Where other nations sought incremental improvements to existing designs, American designers and manufacturers had created something fundamentally new. Where other nations hesitated to commit resources to unproven technology, American industry had scaled production to equip millions of soldiers. The result was a weapon that would prove decisive in combat across every theater of World War II, and nowhere more dramatically than in the Philippine Islands, where Japanese forces armed with bolt-action rifles were about to face the full weight of American semi-automatic firepower.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The firepower advantage demonstrated at Leyte rippled through the entire Pacific War's final year, fundamentally altering Japanese defensive calculations and American tactical doctrine. Within weeks of the initial landing, reports from frontline units confirmed what military planners had theorized but never proven at scale. Semi-automatic rifles provided such decisive advantages that they effectively multiplied American infantry strength by a factor of 3 to 5 in direct combat engagements. By November 1944, Japanese Imperial Headquarters in Tokyo was receiving detailed analyses from commanders throughout the Philippines. These reports, later captured and translated by American intelligence services, revealed the cascading psychological and tactical effects of the firepower disparity. One classified assessment from General Yamashita's staff stated, "American infantry weapons represent fundamental advantage in all direct engagements. Our forces cannot achieve fire superiority regardless of tactical position or numerical strength. Conventional defensive tactics are ineffective against this firepower. The psychological transformation was even more significant than the tactical implications. Japanese soldiers, indoctrinated with Bushido warrior code, emphasizing courage and aggressive spirit, found themselves in a situation where these qualities provided no advantage. A brave soldier with an Arisaka rifle charging an American position would be cut down before closing to effective range. A disciplined soldier maintaining his defensive position would be suppressed by fire volume he could not match. The spiritual and cultural foundations of Japanese military effectiveness were being negated by industrial technology. American tactical innovation accelerated throughout the Philippines campaign as commanders learned to exploit their firepower advantage. The marching fire technique, where advancing infantry maintained continuous fire while moving toward enemy positions, became standard practice. This tactic, impractical with bolt-action rifles that required soldiers to stop and manually cycle the action, was devastatingly effective with M1 Garands. Japanese defenders faced walls of advancing American soldiers, each firing repeatedly, creating psychological pressure that broke defensive cohesion before physical contact occurred. The evolution of American squad tactics reflected the weapon's capabilities. Squad leaders learned to orchestrate fire from 8 to 12 riflemen, each capable of sustained rapid fire, creating overlapping fields of fire that made Japanese counterattacks suicidal. The traditional emphasis on machine guns as the primary source of squad firepower diminished. While machine guns remained important, the M1 Garand ensured that rifle squads maintained formidable firepower even when separated from crew-served weapons. Medical records from Navy hospital ships treating wounded from the Philippines campaign documented another consequence of the firepower disparity. Japanese casualties showed much higher ratios of killed to wounded compared to previous campaigns. Medical analysts attributed this to the volume of fire. Japanese soldiers were being hit by multiple rounds in engagements, reducing survival rates. American casualties, conversely, showed improved survival rates as superior firepower allowed faster casualty evacuation and better position security during medical treatment. The campaign's final statistics told the story in stark numbers. By the time organized Japanese resistance ended in the Philippines in mid-1945, American forces had killed approximately 336,000 Japanese soldiers while suffering 62,000 casualties themselves. The kill ratio, while influenced by many factors including air superiority and artillery support, reflected fundamentally unequal ground combat. In infantry engagements specifically, American forces consistently inflicted casualties at rates 3 to 5 times higher than they received. Japanese attempts to counter the firepower disadvantage grew increasingly desperate as the campaign progressed. Some units attempted mass nighttime infiltration attacks, hoping darkness would negate American firepower advantages. These tactics achieved occasional local successes, but ultimately failed. American forces adapted by establishing defensive perimeters with overlapping fields of fire, and the M1 Garand's rate of fire remained effective even in limited visibility conditions. The distinctive muzzle flash of the .30-06 cartridge actually aided target identification for other defenders. Other Japanese units attempted to avoid direct combat entirely, reverting to guerrilla tactics and ambushes. But even these approaches proved ineffective against American firepower. Ambushes require inflicting rapid casualties before the enemy can respond effectively, but American forces could generate suppressive fire so quickly that ambushing units found themselves pinned down and overwhelmed before achieving their objectives. The implications extended beyond the Philippines. Planning for the proposed invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, incorporated assumptions about firepower advantages that the M1 Garand provided. Military planners calculated that the semi-automatic rifle effectively multiplied American infantry strength, reducing the numerical superiority required for successful amphibious assaults. Documents from the Joint Chiefs of Staff indicated that planners believed one American infantry division equipped with M1 Garands was equivalent to 1.5 to 2 divisions equipped with bolt-action rifles in combat effectiveness. Japanese military leadership recognized the implications. Post-war interrogations of senior Japanese officers revealed that many had concluded by early 1945 that conventional military resistance was futile. The combination of American air superiority, naval dominance, artillery firepower, and infantry weapons superiority meant that Japanese forces could not win battles, only delay defeat while accumulating casualties. Some historians argue this realization influenced Japanese leadership's eventual decision to surrender, although the atomic bombings and Soviet entry into the war were obviously decisive factors. The M1 Garand's influence extended into the post-war era and subsequent conflicts. The rifle served as the standard American infantry weapon through the Korean War, where it again demonstrated decisive advantages against opponents equipped with bolt-action rifles and early semi-automatic weapons. Veterans of both World War II and Korea consistently rated the M1 Garand as the finest infantry rifle of its era. General George S. Patton's assessment, the greatest battle implement ever devised, became the weapon's enduring epitaph. The technological lessons were absorbed by military establishments worldwide. By the 1950s, every major military power was developing or adopting semi-automatic or automatic rifles. The bolt-action rifle, dominant for 70 years, was relegated to specialized roles like sniping. The M1 Garand demonstrated that in modern industrial warfare, the side with superior technology and the industrial capacity to deploy it at scale would dominate the battlefield regardless of numerical strength or tactical positioning. The human cost of this technological disparity was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of Japanese soldiers died in combat against American forces throughout the Pacific War, many of them brave, well-trained, disciplined soldiers whose primary disadvantage was inadequate equipment. The M1 Garand saved countless American lives by providing overwhelming firepower advantages, but it also inflicted catastrophic casualties on an enemy unable to respond effectively. Today, the M1 Garand occupies a revered place in military history and American culture. The rifle appears in museums, is cherished by collectors, and remains popular among target shooters for its accuracy and reliability. Veterans organizations maintain the weapon's memory, and every year ceremonies honor those who carried it in combat. The distinctive ping of the ejecting en-bloc clip remains one of the most recognizable sounds of World War II. But beyond nostalgia and historical interest, the M1 Garand represents a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Victory belongs to the side that can deliver the most effective firepower most efficiently. John Garand's design, American industrial capacity, and the soldiers who carried the weapon into combat combined to create a system that decided battles before they began. The Japanese discovered on the beaches of Leyte and in the jungles of the Philippines that courage and training could not overcome the simple mathematics of firepower. 8 rapid shots versus 1 slow shot, repeated millions of times across hundreds of engagements, accumulated into inevitable defeat.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.